Hey everybody, this is our first Visual Basic video. Welcome in. Thanks for watching. In this video I'm going to show you how you can use random numbers, but before we do that, there's a really important thing we need to learn, and that would be how do you do variables in Visual Basic, because it is a little bit different in Visual Basic than it is in Python. In Python you just say the variable and then it just uses it, figures it out. In Visual Basic you sort of have to plan ahead. So I'm going to call my project name variables and random numbers. And then I'm also going to save it to the desktop. Stop me if you've heard this before. Check mark, framework, create. Be patient here as the computer creates this, and alright, so I am going to lock in my toolbox. Solution Explorer, I just accidentally closed. Oh no, what do I do? I go to View, Solution Explorer, and I just open it back up and I lock into place. See? No need to worry, it's easy to fix. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the properties of my form. I'm going to go to the background color, as I typically do. I'm going to say web. And I will just pick a color here, like dark red, let's say. And then I'm going to go down here. There's text. And let me move my recording window out of the way. That's awkward. I'm going to call this variables and randoms. And just so we get practice with this, I'm going to change my width. Let's say 500 by 300. So relatively small. Put my recording window back where it was because it's covering my properties. I'm going to have to figure out what to do with that. Maybe I'll put it up top, let's say. Hey, there we go. Okay. So we have our form properties set up the way I want them to. Just two quick things, background color and text. Next thing I'm going to do, early on, we're going to often make a button. So I'm going to just click a button. I'm going to make my button nice and big, covering up nearly the entire form. And on my button, I'm going to go to text. And I'm going to change my text to 0 at the moment because I am going to do randoms, so random numbers. I'm going to go to the background color. I'm going to just choose a color that sort of stands out. Perhaps I will do violet. And then I will go to the font. So I often make the font nice and big. That way you guys can see it really easily. So look, now it's really big. And if you don't have a decent color, if it's hard to see the black, you can go to the foreground color, of course, and you can change the foreground color, like I'll do snow, which it's basically white. So we have our text, foreground color, background color, button on top of a form where we change the background color and the text. These are all the basic changes that we often do with our Visual Basic program. Nothing I just did should be brand new to you. So from here, let's talk code. This is the most important part of this video, is the code. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to double click on the button, which is going to take me to the code for button 1 click. Now, the order of class this week, what we do in class on Monday/Tuesday, depending on if you're first period or ninth period, I'm going to go over some definitions and vocabulary and notes on Visual Basic. So one of the things I plan on mentioning, if you're watching it before you're watching this video, is the idea of a sub, the subroutine. This is the little bitty program. It's like part of the program. It's a subroutine. So you can think of your entire program as the routine, and this is a subroutine, a little itty bitty part of it. So just like there's the idea of, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, that's kind of sort of how our Visual Basic programs are going to be lined up. We have a little code for button 1 click. And so let me show you what I'm going to do to make random numbers work inside of my button. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do it. So what we've done so far, in order to change the property, I've said button 1 dot, so button 1 is my noun. It's what I'm working with. Dot text. That's the number. Currently it's 0. All right. So if I say the button1.text equals, and for right now, I'm going to pick a number, 7. Okay. So clearly, like, this would be exciting if I run the program just to show you, which you know what's going to happen. I mean, you guys are all smart. You've been in this class for almost 3/4 of a year. Right now it's 0. Guess what's going to happen if I click the button? Oh my gosh, it turns to 7. What happens if I click over and over again? It's still 7. Right? It's not random. It's because I said let's do 7. So what I'm going to do is put the random number formula in here, and it's going to be similar to what you did back in Python, but not exactly the same. All right. So I'm going to put int, right? Int looks familiar, right? That's the integer function. Makes it into an integer, takes a decimal, and chops off the decimal point. We call that truncating. It goes down. So like 4.5 becomes 4. 5.2 becomes 5. 6.9 becomes 6. It always goes down. Then rnd for random. Right? So instead of the word random, it's just rnd. And then multiply. So the asterisk. Many of the symbols between languages are similar. It's like plus minus, times divide, still an asterisk, still the division symbol for slash. And if I want a number, let's say 1 to 10. Well, what's the range? 10. Highest number minus lowest number plus 1. That has not changed. 10 minus 1 plus 1 equals 10. So I put 10 there. On the end of it, I put plus 1 because that's the low number. And so that's your random number formula. It's not terribly different than from Python. It's not different from Java either when you get to that. But from what we've done, it's not terribly different from Python. So you have the int function will take a decimal and turn it into an integer. Always truncate, chop off the decimal. RND is a function which gives a decimal from 0 up to 1. But remember, it's not including. Okay? Again, like nothing I'm saying here should be new to you. I'm just putting notes in here because in case you've forgotten or in case you just never learned it. In Visual Basic, you're making a random number virtually the same as you did in Python. And by the way, I should have mentioned this. I'm probably going to mention it in class to you on Monday, Tuesday, but in case you're looking at this before, in Visual Basic, the way you make a comment is the apostrophe, not the pound sign. So, for example, up at the top here, I should be putting, my name. Well, actually, let me first put variables and random numbers. Then I'll put this as my header. This is, whenever you're watching it. And then this is period, either 1 or 9. So you're still going to put that header at the top of these. But as I said, it's now the apostrophe rather than the pound sign. It's no difference otherwise. So you have int, rnd, and then, of course, the range of numbers is what follows the multiplication. So, in other words, the times sign. The range of numbers is the highest number minus the lowest number plus 1. So, when it starts on 1, the 1's cancel out because minus 1 for lowest, plus 1 for the formula, minus 1 plus 1 cancels and you just get the highest. That's why when you do 1 to 6, it's times 6. 1 to 10, it's times 10. It's always going to be that range number. However, when it's something like, I want the numbers from 10 to 20, 20 minus 10 plus 1 is 11, because there's 11 numbers from 10 to 20. So again, this should not be new to you. We've talked about this at length throughout the first part of the course. But there it is. Once again, there's the formula to get this number right here. And then, of course, you add on the lowest number after the quantity. So after the times 10, you do plus 1. Okay? So let me run this now and see what we get. 8, 6, 6, 3. Now, of course, when you click and it doesn't change, that's not that it's not working. It's probably what's happening is you're getting the unlikely, but it's still completely possible scenario where the number you're clicking is the same as what you just had. So in other words, like if I click right now and it still stays as 8, it's not that that's not working. It's just it picked 8 again. So there you go. It's going to give you different numbers from 1 to 10. And if you hit the space bar, by the way, with a button, it also will click the mouse. And then if you hold down the enter key, and it goes really fast, which is the same functionality as your mouse on Windows. Now, something interesting here, though. Let me run this again. My first couple numbers are 8, 6, 6, 3. Okay? If I run it again, I'm going to get 8, 6, 6, 3. The numbers are the same. Obviously, we don't want that. You might remember us talking back when we did random numbers all the way back in like September, October. Computers cannot really make random numbers. They make what are called pseudo-random numbers. They're kind of random. We watched that video, the number 5 video on random numbers, the strontium radioactive material that generates a random number. Well, guess what? Visual Basic right now is making pseudo-random numbers, but it's not using anything to seed the random number generator. We need to tell the computer that when we load this program to start using a random number generator that is truly closer to random rather than the same pattern of numbers every time. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to go back to my design. And I need to double click on the form itself. So not the button, but double click on the form. So like the little red area, if I double click there, it takes me to the code for form load. Form load is the section of code which runs when you first start your program, when you literally load the form into memory. We start the random number generator with the keyword randomize. So if I say randomize, and I just hit enter, what that command does is it's going to make, every time you load the program, it's going to make your numbers appear to be more random. So it's still pseudo-random because, you know, if we dug deeper, there probably would be a connection. But instead of 8663, now it's 5954. All right, if I run it again, 7, 1, 10, 7. So it is different. Anytime you make random numbers, you want to put that in your code. Be sure to add randomize to form load whenever you use random numbers. You must do that. Otherwise, your numbers will not be random. It's like having a game of blackjack or poker where you're dealing the same cards over and over again. So, lots of notes so far, but very little code. All right, we just have randomize inside form load, and we have button 1 text inside button 1 click. Right, pretty simple. What about variables? Because we haven't really used variables in this program. We've used a tool with a property, but we haven't said something like num. Okay? So here's what we need to do variables in Visual Basic. Everything in between these subs exists as its own little program. It's a subroutine, so like this is its own bit of code. This is its own bit of code. This only runs when you first load the program. This only runs when you click the button, which is going to happen over and over again, right? Well, what I do is I come up here, I make a little bit of space. I go above the first sub, but still after public class form 1, because what I'm saying in here is what I'm about to do is going to apply to everything within this little bracket. So like you can think of public class form 1 as the beginning, and then you can think of end class as the end. And so all of the code, all of the subroutines I have are going to have access to this variable. All right. So watch this. I'm going to say the command dim. It stands for dimension. You're setting aside memory for a variable. Then you give it a name, num. Then you say the keyword as, and then you say what kind of variable it is. For now, we're going to stick with the easy types of variables. I'm going to make this an integer. Whole number, positive, negative, or 0. Dim num as integer. What we've just done, we must declare variables in Visual Basic, unlike Python. Before we use a variable, we must give the variable a name and a type. In other words, is it an integer? Is it a decimal? Is it a string? Is it a Boolean? What is it? That's why we say dim, and then we have the name, and then as, and then we have the type. So dim num as integer, dim name as string for words, dim tax rate as float or decimal. We'll talk about those types later. But what we've just done, by declaring a variable, I can now come into either of these subroutines. If I start typing num, it recognizes it. Because now we've told the computer, hey, this is a thing. Without that line of code, if I come up here and I comment that out for a moment so it's not really there, if I start typing num, it's not there. You have to give it a name and a type up at the top before you use it. Now that we've done that, well, what can we do? Okay, so I'm going to come above this. I'm going to say num equals int rnd times 10 plus 1. So now the variable is equal to the random number. Then this, I'm going to say, I'll make that num. So I'm splitting up what was one line into two lines. Should I do that? Probably not, but I just wanted to show you that that's how it works. So you declare a variable at the top, and then you can use it all throughout your program, all of the subs. Okay. Now, where you declare it matters. There's something we call variable scope. The scope of something is where you're allowed to use it. When you dim this up here, it has scope throughout the entire class. Let's say I dim something inside for mode. If I say dim total as integer inside here. Okay. Inside here at the bottom, I can refer to total. See how I start typing total? It's in the pop-up. It's in the autocomplete. But if I come back up here, if I start typing total, nowhere to be found. If you dim something only within a sub, it only exists in that sub. So that's why, for the most part, we are going to be declaring variables up at the top. So you have integers, you have strings, you have, as I said, there's floats, which stands for floating point number. There's also double for longer floating point numbers. It's double precision. And then you also have decimal, you have Boolean, all kinds of stuff. Eventually, you also learn how to make variables that are tools. You can dim a button. You can dim a checkbox. We'll get to that eventually. So there's a good video on how to do random numbers and how to make variables. And thanks for watching. I will see you soon.